get started. Today we'll be talking about 5D BIM, and as you know, me, if you have seen my webcasts before, I'm more driven by processes and the workflows and the reality of the working of the 5D part of the BIM than just softwares and the tools. We'll be talking a little bit about the tools. I'll be showing you a few screenshots, but this is not really a tool course. I mean, there are so many tools we can learn. There are so many processes. We'll get into details, but this is a very high level webcast just to understand where the market is with 5D BIM, what it is, basically what it will do, and where it is going in a nutshell. This podcast is basically conducted for National Institute of Building Technology, NIBT. I've spoken this multiple times. I think the core value of NIBT is to focus on construction processes, construction management, creating more professionals, entrepreneurs, and not the mainstream institutional setup where it is more skilled laborers, whether they're taught softwares or old age books and construction trainings that is like outdated these days. The point is the modern processes, the modern technologies are changing the market dynamics so much that it is important that we understand how the tools are becoming more prominent, how the processes are becoming more prominent, and how the construction industry is changing as we know it due to the digitization, information age, and things along those lines. So it's important for everyone in this field to be up to speed with the change in the technology, change in the education, so we can keep up in our lives, in our careers, and things along those lines. A little bit about me. This is Chetan Mughal. I am the CEO of a company called BIM Engineering US. We are located in the Washington DC area. You can get in touch with me through LinkedIn or any other medias. I'll be speaking in Smart Cities Expo in Delhi in May. So if you're there, please come and see me. So I'll get into the next topic. So let's talk about agenda. We'll talk about basically what 5D BIM is, the use cases, the benefits of 5D BIM, barriers obviously, and then I'll refocus, and I've been doing this for a while, where I basically try to explain how BIM is not a software. You just cannot learn a software. If you do know a software, it's really 10% of what BIM is. And if you really want to practice BIM, it's not the software that you need to learn. So I'll get into the first slide, which is where does BIM fit in the World Wide Web of BIM? You can see my previous podcast on what I mean by BIM when I take a reference of World Wide Web and how I talk about the information space, really, because it's an information space. Just like World Wide Web is an information space. It's not a software, it's not a tool, it's not a process, it's not educational, it is not driven by workflow only. What I mean by that is it's not only all those things. It's really all of the above. It's a gamut of things, just different skill sets and different tools and different technologies, database and PHPs and your Javas. You can keep talking about them, the UX designers and the designers, and the creativity goes into it. There's so many things that goes into it. It's just information, management of information, and interaction of information, so many things. So that's how BIM is. BIM is really the information space to me, and it's how people manage that information, how people create that information, how people interact between the information. That's what BIM is. What creates that? Softwares that create information, the softwares that manages information, softwares that make information interact, and there are users at different level, and that's what BIM is. 5D fits in there with here, which basically right there is 5D, which has cost element in it. That is just the cost element in it. If you want to get basics on BIM, you can watch our previous webcast. This is really trying to get into the mixes of 5Ds and what it is. So here it is. So in simple words, 5D basically is 3D plus cost. You don't necessarily need a schedule. If a schedule is there, it is mostly driven for cash flows, cash management, cash forecasting, and things along those lines reasons. Okay, so even if you might see schedules come in, it's really to understand the cash flows, and we can get into the details. We have courses that teach details of what cash flow is and how to do a cash flow. This is very big overview course really. So if you can understand the concept of what 5D is, it is not necessarily a schedule, right? It's not necessarily a schedule. We talked about 4D in a few podcasts prior to this, and now we're going to talk about 5D, which really is cost driven, and the schedule is for the purpose of cash flow analysis if there is anything. So it's a fix right there. Okay. Process of putting together a 5D. Just like we spoke about how to put a 4D model before in a previous, we basically have a 3D geometry, which is right here, the models, the columns, the windows, the doors, everything. And they have cost attached to it, right? Just like you can see, all the costs are attached to it. The quantities are attached to it. And it could be any software, mostly softwares, all of them do the same thing. You take this element data from the 3D object geometry, and then you attach cost to it. Okay, as I said, 4D can and cannot be part of it. It's not, 5D doesn't mean it needs to have a schedule. It's not an extension of 4D. 5D is an independent process. Okay, so this is a very important thing to learn. 3D, 4D, 5D are not progressive. It doesn't, 5D is not an extension or add-on of a 4D. It's an independent process. Now it can have schedule, as I said earlier, but the primary purpose of 5D is really this. This is the gamut of 5D here. Okay, not necessarily the schedule, but schedules do come into play. They occasionally do, just for cash flow reasons, as I was saying. So this is how a model is put together. You take these elements, each of these elements, you put a cost to it, square foot, linear foot, volume, however the costs are, and that's how you get elements. So if you attach an element, a column, a cost of per volume of concrete, all the concrete costs that are associated will get that cost. So it populates most of it. Okay, that essentially is how a 5D model is put together. So use cases of 5D, right? As I said, cash flow. So what happens is, like, think about this, right? If you were trying to explain a banker, cash flow analysis, we are trying to explain executives or owners how the cash is going to be spent in the project so that they can manage the cash very well. If cash is, most of the times finances and cash are not always available because if you keep the money in the bank, as you know, you start charging interest. So it's really for bankers to understand when the money is needed, and so that they can help us maintain the schedule, right? What you do is, if you have a 4D or 5D model where you have a schedule and the model connected, and the cost is now also connected with 5D, and you run a simulation, you can show cost analysis per month billing, per quarterly billing, whatever the billing cycles are. And you can actually show what is getting put, who is billing, if a mechanical contractor is billing or concrete contractor is billing, who is billing how much. You can separate out how much is billing by that much. So it's a visualization tool. So it could be a visualization tool to understand the cash flow. Okay, so that's basically how we're trying to understand the costs, the consistency around the costs, because we are trying to run a simulation. So you'll see this, but it's obviously a better financial tool, because now you can see a building go up and the cash it's connected to it. You can see how the cash is spent to put the building together. Okay, and then obviously you can track it through the implementation phase. You can always track it, right? So now you have simulated it, you can now start actual construction, and you can keep running the simulations and compare the reality to it and modify it. So that's how it means during the implementation you're really tracking the process, and this is the benefit of the 5D BIM. So it doesn't necessarily stop at the pre-planning phase. You can go all the way into the construction phase, where simulations are run every month, every 2 weeks, and their comparative analysis is done, given to financing company is given to owners. This is what we planned. Here's how we're spending the cash. Based on this, there's a slight modification of what is going to happen in next 6 to 8 months. That way they get planning. They're always adapting to the plan also. Obviously, it is a huge budgeting tool. So what happens with budgeting tool is, let me clean this up a little bit. What happens with the budgeting tool is really, you are connecting the 5D. So obviously you have the geometry, right? I mean, what basically the geometry. Okay, so you have a 3D geometry basically, and the 3D geometry is getting connected to the cost, right? So you have the cost connected to this. And that's it. That's where it stays, and it is really used for budgeting tools. So not necessarily for cash flow. So you can take the schedule out of it. Now it's just looking at the bottom line, and you can change. What I've seen is you can change the types of foundings of peer foundation if you do, strip footers or something along those lines, right? Or you can change the facade from brick to glazing, and you can do it right in front of the owner and client. And I've done this myself, where we would sit in the meeting with the client, and this model with the cost is connected to it, and the owner will say, that's too high, the cost is too high, how can we change it? I'll say, okay, well, maybe if we change the square foot cost of brick masonry and we use some other brick, the cost will go down by $4 a square foot. And they say, okay, try, show me how it looks. And I'll plug that brick in, and the cost will go down. And then they say, I'm not sure I'd like it. How about we change the number of windows we have? And I'll just change the number of windows, and it will change the cost. How about I change the brick to glazing, and then we add glazing to it, and suddenly the dollar goes up or down, or mostly up from the brick side. And then the cost goes up, and they'll say, you know what, I like this concept. Why don't we freeze this concept and get to the reality? So this is used at a very high level, which is, and we'll talk about it more on a schematic level for budgeting tool. It can also be learned from a when we say budgeting tool, we also think about an estimation, right? We always talked about estimation where it's more real. Now the model is completely done. So we have the 3D geometry data from us, right? A contractor, in each contractor has this 3D object, and when they're bidding the work, they use this data, and they will all plug in their individual cost, whatever the cost was. So cost 1, 2, 3 contractor. And they, at that point, are not doing a quantity survey, because during the design phase, the 3D is done, all the objects are there, all they're doing is they're putting their numbers in there. So there is no quantity survey. The quantity survey is already done through the object, and it is very accurate. So now it's just a matter of putting the costs in. And that's how the budgeting goes. So everyone will have their own costs. So that's why how it is used during really a budgeting, during an early schematic budgeting side, and also during bidding size, when the 3D and every contractors will interact. Okay. So financial planning, we talked about this earlier a little bit, right? We talked about the bankers and the cash flow analysis. It's kind of tied into the same concept. We talked about how financing companies, bankers, owners, governments, institutions, where they would like to see, they can predict the cash flow with the building. So it's very easy for them to understand how the building is put together and how the money is spent. So it's consistent because they get a consistent competitive product every month, however you're billing, and it's predictable because they can see what was planned, how it is spent, and they can plan it. So it's more consistent. They like it versus just throwing a bill at them and surprise, right? And then change management is becoming a very big tool with 5D, and it can and cannot become. But the point is here: so you have a 3D object, and what happens during the process of construction or design or coordination? Let's say you get a 3D one, right? It's a different model. It's just an extension, a similar model, but not real. And the cost of this is different, right? We're calling it whatever it is. So let's say $1. So the cost of this is equal, and this is not equal, right? Because the 3D objects are moving during coordination phase. Now you can show straightforward, black and white, say, you had so many light fixtures, and here's the cost for this, and now you have so many light fixtures, or that much linear feet of pipe, or that much linear feet of walls, and now because the walls have moved, there are more things, the cost have changed. It's very factual analysis, and you can throw this model one can be red, one can be a green color model, and you can see how the comparative works and how the models have changed, and here is what has changed. This is a fact from the model, and here is changing the cost. So from the cost change management standpoint, everyone can see this is black and white, so there is no question of no, it was not there, or you added so much. No, everything is very factual, so it's much easier for all the parties to organize, to manage the review process, and to get to the approval process, because it's all the information is there in a very clear factual format. So I can see this tool getting used extensively through change management, and I don't see that in the market yet. Maybe it has started to pick up, but definitely some elements of at least quantities are used in the change management process, where you can show the old quantities with the new, and you can show the owner that they really are getting more material. They should obviously pay for more material because that wasn't part of the planning phase. So I think it's a good tool to use. We need to start seeing it more and more. It's not really penetrated in the market. So that's it. And then, so same thing, right? So we talked about the schematic model, right? During the design phase, where the design is not final, you haven't decided, for architects especially, when you're in design tool, right? This is for the pre-construction folks who are helping the owner and the architect to budget and estimate little on the earlier side, where you don't have real quantities. Things are not designed to 100%. They don't even know what skin to use. If they're using a glazing envelope versus a brick envelope, I was giving an example earlier. That's basically what the schematic phase is. It's really important because the owner can really pick and choose what the costs are for each material or each product, and they can pick and choose, and you can change that in a model by a few clicks, and then suddenly they see the new rendering. It's not a very detailed rendering. It's never a detailed rendering. It's very schematic renderings. It's like almost a massing model at that point, and they can see this massing model, how the building will look, and then they will also see the cost to it, and they can understand, and they can say, yes, I want to go in this direction. I like this budget numbers. I want to go in this direction. It's a very high level tool, which is getting used a little bit in the industry by a few people, and I'm seeing it more and more getting adapted. The other process is obviously pre-construction phase, and we talked about earlier bidding and estimating, right? So I don't want to repeat myself. I think it's the same slide with a different concept. So we talked about where it is used, and now we're basically saying at what phases of construction. It's really more phase driven. So how it is used in schematic phase, how it is used in pre-construction phase, and obviously in construction phase we saw change management being a huge tool and being used to prove the more factual way of cost. So these are the phases. So this is exact same slide as previous. It's a different concept of which phases and what can use in each phase. Benefits to engineering contractors. I think I'll keep this slide open. We're talking about ROI. That is really where this tool comes into play. You can look at simulations. You can look at a lot of information with cost. So you can play and pick what you want. So it's a very good tool for the owners especially. The contractors tend to use this tool to get new clients, right? I mean, if you present a client not just with a cost sheet but a 3D model, and you sit with the client and you help them design their building, you help them understand what they want, and you give them a cost of what they want, they will love it because they know exactly how much it's gone. So they're not, okay, I want this, and then you go and say, okay, give me 2 days, let me give you the cost for it, and then it's a very lengthy process. So most of the times the databases on the softwares are already built at the back end, so you can change things dynamically in front of the client. In 2 minutes you'll see new costs populate. So that's what we see here. So obviously you have, from the owner's perspective, this has a better tool because they can see how much money they want to spend, how much their rate of the return of investment would be, things like that. They can calculate those things. Obviously we know at some level, at least from a pre-construction level now, that we can get actual quantities, and all we have to do is plug in the cost, and we can actually get a proper cash flow, proper cost at a pre-construction level. I mean, obviously if you have it at pre-construction level, have it at construction level, which is used as a tool for change management, right? Now provides risk analysis. This is a big deal because you can forecast now, and you can assign risks to it and say, okay, possibility of me going over the budget based on factors that are beyond the controls could be 2% based on the place, location, history. So we can have our own factors because databases could be equal. Like let's say you can say, okay, we're building in the during rainy seasons or winter seasons or whatever the seasons you are. You can say, typically the cost goes up and down by 2% during winter seasons. So you can do risk analysis and you can add that variable in your process, in your cash flow, so people can understand, oh, okay, by the way, based on the risk analysis, if there's a 2% add if you start a project in winter or in the rainy season, right? So obviously we talk about design change and change management. It's very important for designers to know what they're designing and the cost, especially for higher projects, because they are also required, architects need to give a cost breakdown to their clients and say what we're designing is about $20 a square foot, $50 a square foot. Sometimes owners have that requirement to the designer. They say, listen, I have X amount of dollars in my finance. I've been approved for so much money, and that gives us about this much amount of square feet. If you can do better, do better. And then designer's job is to make sure within that budget they give the better product, good looking, real estate wise is better. So they can run a better simulation from the cost perspective versus trying to get to the contractor and the construction phase and realize, by the way, hey, it's more expensive or not that expensive. So if it's both ways are bad, right? If it's more expensive, obviously we know the owner is going to look at the design team or the budgeting team and say, what happened? Now we have to go back to the drawing board and redesign. And so whatever the cost we spent up this time and the time we spent this time is a waste, or not necessarily a waste, but it's an added resource now, and it has extended the time. Same with if the costs are low. The owner is saying, by the way, I have this budget, I want to spend it. I have this dollars associated to this, and I want to spend it to get the product. I don't want low cost. So give me better features, get me a better flooring, get me a better exterior system. I want this, I want that. So both of them can be counterproductive when you guys start seeing them during the pre-construction, at the end of the pre-construction phase, or start beginning of the construction and bidding phase, right? Because at that point you have to go back to the drawing board and redo things. You don't want to be there. That's why the design side, if architects are using these kind of tools, it helps them to make sure that everyone understands what the costs are and they're constantly monitoring it. And obviously we can predict the cost and the change. This is the exact same point to the previous one. It's predictability from an architect's perspective and the owner's perspective, that okay, we have this model now, so when you go to the construction, we get 3-4% variable from what we have. It's not going to be drastically different. So barriers, right? This is the key barrier I see is basically this guy here. Okay, the first one, cost. What is cost? If you really think about it, the biggest portion of 5D BIM is cost. And if it is cost, how it is cost? What is cost of a material and labor, right? There are two basic portions, right? It's a material cost. So if you buy a couch, a window, it's a labor and a material driven cost, right? So material cost can escalate, right? As I'm saying, they're always changing depending upon, sometimes the cost of steel is high, aluminum is high, sometimes it is not. So market dynamics make a big difference in the material cost. And in order to predict that, it's very constantly predicting that it's extremely difficult, right? And that is the biggest challenge. And labor is, how much time do you need to install a window, can be answered in many different ways, right? So there are a lot of variables. You can get if you plot, a chart, and you can see there is a delta negative and delta positive, and you can see a belt, nice little patch where the cost can be, right? You can see it has a huge standard deviation, right? It has a larger standard deviation, can be higher or lower, but it's never close to zero of what you planned, because everyone it's higher. If it's on the 15th floor, the cost of putting a window is higher than if it's on the first floor, right? So it's because it's very different dynamics at that point. If it's, how is the weather condition that day? Is it windy? Is it not? So things like that matter for the labor perspective because it takes more effort, it takes more tools, and it's very difficult to control them and especially price them and budget them in the beginning. You cannot see how that day is going to be. You don't know 6 months from down the line how the copper cost is going to be. So it's very difficult to lock down the cost. That is the biggest challenge of 5D is those costs, is just locking down those costs. Now, a lot of contractors are getting huge success with quantities, right? If you have quantities, no problem. They don't change. Quantities are quantities, that you can manage that. But the cost of material of that particular material plus the labor is always moving up and down, depending on who you ask, when you ask, how you ask. So that is the biggest problem of the job. That's why 5D BIM on the quantity side, but it's if you look at just quantities, it's not 5D, right? Just taking out quantities from a 3D model is not 5D. It is a cost that makes it a 5D. And the costs are that much variable, it cannot be trusted, a product cannot be trusted. So what it boils down to is this word here. This is the most important. 5D, 3D is nothing. It's irrelevant if 3D exists or not at some point. It can be easy. Data is the biggest problem of 5D BIM. And what I mean by data is consistent data, relevant data, because from the city to city, from space to space, from area to area, from region to region, the cost change dramatically. Supply and demand of labor changes. So we can keep going, and all these things are becoming very relevant to us, and that's why the accurate and consistent data is not one data. It's every single region, every single city, and every single location, time, when it is, what material it is, what the market is. These all dynamics will change the data dramatically. So the data is always dynamic data. Your model, 3D model, is static at this point. The data is dynamic, and that's how a 5D BIM is probably how I see it will evolve, where someone gets control on managing the data dynamically. We cannot put a static data with the static model and expect to get great results with 5D. We need to have a static model and a dynamic data that moves based on the market conditions as I explained. And then it will have a less risk tolerance, right? Risk tolerance of, okay, if I put a cost of $50 a square foot, what will be the end result? Will it be $70 a square foot because the aluminum and the labor costs are high this month and it's going to take us more, or is it going to be 30? Because as I said earlier, having high or low numbers could be both of them be bad. Okay, so the dynamic data, I think you got my point. So last slide, we want to get back to this software, right? So notice what I just said, right? The data and how the analytics work. We didn't even talk about the 3D model. We didn't even talk about the software. The point is the exact same what I'm trying to say. Software is irrelevant. Those are going to come evolve. They're going to come change. They will show the information the way you want it. So you can pick any software you want at some point. But it's really, this is very important. Your relationships, right? Some contractors have better subcontractor relationships. So if you have a better relationship, someone will be willing to work with you. So now think about it. The data, right? We're talking about the dynamic data. We didn't even talk about relationships. Some clients pay very well. Sometimes they say, listen, hey, we pay in 2 weeks, and no matter what happens, we'll pay in 2 weeks. We don't drag our payments. Guess what? Everyone wants to work for the client, right? That's the client you want to work for. And what happens when you work with, you become more competitive trying to work for the client. Your costs dramatically go down, and this is all people, right? Better planning. Some clients and some contractors plan better. If you're planning better, obviously your costs are going to be different than the guy who doesn't plan better. You manage your resources better, right? You're more programmed. You know how to use resources and where they're critical, where they're not. You're using right talent at the right place. And if the people who are better at that tend to get a better advantage, right? So see how these things, the data, the dynamic data changing can be the key driving factor of 5D. It's not the 3D model that drives 5D. It's really those two last things, as I said, the cost and these relationships and the planning and the resources that really drive things in 5D BIM. That's why most of the tools, but 5D more predominantly, you can see that too. Okay, so thank you for joining us. I hope you like this webcast. It is really a high level overview, right? And the idea is to get into more specifics, trying to teach you the details of cash flow, how to run simulation, things like that. When you get into detailed courses as such, this is a very high level explanation of what we will be coming and teaching you in next few months and things along those lines. So hope you liked this webcast. Please give me your feedbacks, and if you are in the Smart Cities Expo, please come and see me. I'll be speaking. I don't have the exact date and time, but I'll be there all the 3 days. So thank you again for joining. Take care.